Good morning. Everybody are you awake now? Okay, I hear about 5 people around here. I'm very happy that about 5 people are awake and about the rest of you 500 people are sleeping. No? All right, very good. I'm glad that we are able to share some insights. Thank you very much for having me discuss some of these ideas from our study on racial and religious harmony. We've got some slides here, so hopefully you can look at that, and I'll go through them very fast. I've got about 100 slides, and I got 20 minutes, so just divide how much time I need to go through each one of them. Can we have the next slide? You've seen this picture before. It's a cartoon that, and when we think about racial harmony, and first thing, of course, we should think about is racial harm. What can happen when people fight with each other because of race? Now, I was trying to pull out some of the pictures from the internet when it comes to racial tension. You can just back the last slide, please. The last slide. And I was just pulling out the pictures from the internet which has to do with racial tension. And all of them were very gory pictures, so I think it's all RA kind of pictures. So I thought that was not very appropriate. But all of us know about what is racial harm. We know what happens when groups of people fight against each other, are not friendly, not kind. It's very, very difficult. It's a terrible state to be in. None of us wants to live in that kind of environment. So all of us care a lot about racial harmony. We want to have societies where it is racially and religiously harmonious. That's the kind of environment we enjoy. Very often when we think about racial harmony, we've got different ways of thinking about it. But for most people, it is about having some kind of tolerance, or there's an absence of tension. There's nobody killing each other, no fighting, then it's a harmonious society. Martin Luther King was a very famous activist in the 1960s in America, and most people know him as being one of the key people to help to try to fight against laws at that time which segregated African Americans from white Americans. He made a statement, and I read that. It says, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice." So for Martin Luther King, if you say that a place is harmonious, there's true peace, then it's not just about no tension, it's also about justice, everybody having fairness to be able to work and be able to be where they need to be, and there's no discrimination there. Now that's Martin Luther's idea. Over time, many researchers have come up with different ideas of what makes a racially and religiously harmonious society. And so at onepeople.sg and Institute of Policy Studies, we spent a lot of time thinking about some of the important indicators, what would tell us, like a scorecard would tell us, how we are doing as a society. And so here we have a list of 10 indicators which give us a reflection about the state of religious and racial harmony in Singapore. So if you've thought about racial harmony and religious harmony beyond just looking at tolerance, beyond just looking at a lack of tension, beyond even just looking at how many friends you have, to look at about 10 different things which give us an idea. So hopefully this broadens your idea of what we mean when we say racial or religious harmony. Let me take you through some of these things, and let me start with the first one, which was ranked number 1 in our study. So this is the one that we did the best, or at least most people who were part of our survey felt that we had done very well. It goes like this: it is the absence of minority discrimination in using public services. Next slide there. I can't find any slides like this in Singapore. I take this from something in America. It says we serve whites only, no Spanish or Mexicans. Spanish Mexicans are people of a different kind of race compared to most of the other, the white population. So you have here the majority of the population deciding that, hey, in some places we will not have people of another color, another skin tone, another kind of culture come into this place. Now, sadly enough, sometimes that kind of treatment happens in many parts of the world, and it also includes public services. So if you go to the police station, as Mr. Zainuddin shared just now, you're more likely not to be listened to if you are a minority than if you're a majority person. If you are a person of a different skin tone from the majority, whenever you would go somewhere, you would be stopped and they would ask you, what are you doing here? They would always suspect that there's something wrong about you. So in many places, it's just very hard for, if you are not of the majority race, you kind of feel excluded, and you feel that you will not get the best service. You'll be treated in a different way, very often differentially. In Singapore, we're very happy that and all the different places we've asked about hospital services, schools, a social service agency if you needed financial assistance, at the courts, but the police if you reported a crime or suspected of having committed a crime. You can look at that red bar there. That is the bar which says that you are treated worse or much worse. We had to combine worse and much worse because hardly anybody said that was the case. So as you can notice, it is so small proportion of Singaporeans feel that way. Because in general, our public services are very fair. Let me move on to the next one. This is absence of interracial and religious tension. We think about the different kinds of, the next slide, the different kinds of tension points, and we ask people about whether they felt tension in the last year or so. Did they feel a place where they were upset because of something somebody said or did, or whether somebody mocked their belief or practice, and they felt kind of upset about this. Now, once in a while, we read in the newspaper, somebody puts a Facebook statement. And that Facebook statement is terrible because they say something bad about another racial group or another religious group, and they make fun of them. Right, have you read some of those statements before? You've heard it before. I hope none of you contributed to that. None of you added. Just yesterday, I was looking at, somebody had made a statement about, I think it was about Singaporeans. It was on Facebook, and he attracted a lot of different responses. And he made a not very nice statement about Singaporeans. He said, you all are not good for, you're good for nothing, something like that. And a lot of people came back and they had a lot of responses, of course, very unhappy about what he said. But sadly, when they're unhappy with what he said, they also then, says that you come from a country full of criminals and rapists and all the rest of that. So immediately they start becoming very, very unfriendly, and there's tension in that sense. But these things happen very infrequently, and the good thing is, for most people that we surveyed, this was not something which happened as an often thing. It's very, very seldom, rarely did they feel that way. You can look at the dimensions there. No more than 1 out of 10 respondents from all races reported often feeling upset due to any form of racial or religious tension. 6 out of 10 respondents strongly agreed that Singapore is free from racial or religious tension. So we're very happy about that. The third indicator has got to do with embracing, number 3, please. Embracing diversity. Yeah, you can read, embracing diversity. I was in an event just last week. There was an event by SINDA. SINDA is the Singapore Indian Development Association. So it's generally more of it's an association which takes care of the needs of our Singaporean Indian population. And they started off the event. It was an important event. And they started off the event, and what kind of dance did they have? The dance number 1. All of you would expect to have either some kind of Indian dance, Bhangra dance, something like that. But this time when I went there, the first thing that they had, the only dance they had that day, not a dance, a presentation, was actually a Taekwondo presentation. This is very different. This is a martial art presentation. It is not an Indian martial arts, it's a martial art used by the Chinese. But that was the first major thing which would be done right at the beginning of a SINDA event. So I thought about that very hard. I said, this is very interesting because it tells us that more and more of us are willing to embrace the diversity around us. And we're actually quite happy that there are different kinds of people, different races, different religious groups, and we can learn something from them. Which I showed you a picture just now that was, and I asked my son early in the morning because he was seeing me putting up this slide. Now you know when I did the slides. I put this slide and he said, a very interesting slide. So I said, what's more interesting about it? He says, look at this. It's, he could see some of the, Chinese boys and what looked to him as Chinese, and they were playing the kompang, which is kind of a Malay instrument. I think that should be it is normally used for Malay festivals. This is very interesting. So the idea being that people learn to embrace and are happy with the diversity that we have. We enjoy and we say, hey, this is a musical instrument used by people who come from a particular background, but it's very nice. I also enjoy doing that. So we learn to embrace diversity. In our study, for instance, we understood that 6 out of 10 respondents strongly agreed that they could learn a lot from other racial groups. So we learn. So there are people who are Malay, who are Indian, who are Eurasian, from different groups, different cultures, and we actually understand today that we can learn a lot from them. None of us knows it all, but we can learn from someone else. The fourth indicator that was part of our study was something called absence of minority discrimination in the workplace. Now, this is kind of where, it gets to people's livelihood. And when people feel that their livelihood is being taken for granted, or maybe they don't have access to kind of jobs just because of their skin color, it makes people get very upset. The next slide, please. We asked questions like this in our survey about how often the people who took part of our survey felt racially discriminated in their everyday life. So we asked them about, what about going to work, when at work, or when applying for a job, or being considered for a job promotion? Do you feel discriminated in these ways? Some people, or people all over the world, who sometimes are minorities in a society, might face a lot of roadblocks. And everywhere they go, they find, it's very difficult. And after a while, they feel that, is this something more than just, something just happened by chance? Could it be because of my color, because of my race, because of my cultural background, maybe because of my religion? Is that why I'm not able to get these good jobs? In our study, we were interested in looking at that in Singapore. And we're happy to report that only 2 out of 10 Malay or Indian respondents reported that they often felt this for at least one of the items in this indicator. Now, hopefully it would be 0 out of 10. But here now we've got 2 out of 10. But we know that there's a way that this can, over time, should be able to change. It's also interesting that when we looked at our results, we noticed that those who felt more discriminated tended to be those who were more likely to have lower levels of education, they had less income, and they lived in smaller flats. So they tended to most likely be found in job sectors which tended to be where those who have lesser education are part of. In that kind of context, for one, we know that most likely people will tend to speak in a language, not necessarily English. And so sometimes minorities find it very difficult because in that setting they're not able to communicate, not able to speak. And so with that kind of boundaries, they feel that maybe, I don't feel accepted in this place. And maybe people in this place don't really like me to be around. Especially if you're there and then you are trying to do something and everybody else is speaking their own language and you're the only one and you can't speak the same language and you feel left out and you're not part of the conversation. So you feel that, I'm unfairly being treated in this place. So that probably is why that particular group have more concerns. We looked at other issues. We looked at interracial and religious comfort, both in the public sphere and the private sphere. These are big words, but how comfortable are we having a friend or having someone, an employee, having someone to be our boss? How comfortable are we having a neighbor who is of another race from ourselves? There are 2 kinds of relationships. One kind of relationship is relationships in what we call the public sphere. These are like your employer, neighborhood. There are other kinds of relationships which are private or much more closer, intimate relationships. These are relationships like who will you marry? People you would marry, who you would end up dating, who you end up being okay if they end up marrying into your family. Now, in America, when they do this kind of research, when they look at, for instance, are people all right with someone else coming into their family who is from another race? They said, how would you react if a member of your family were going to marry someone of another race? You can notice maybe about 60% actually say, it's all right, we can survive with that. They're comfortable with that. Now, in our Singapore context, when it comes to very close, next slide, when it comes to very close relationships, like a marriage partner, for instance, about a third of our population is all right with that. So we've not reached that stage where it doesn't matter. There's still concerns about maybe race, and maybe more so, maybe religious beliefs. Maybe you feel that some religious beliefs are very different, so it's very difficult to have a lifelong marital relationship, and for good reasons. But for many other areas, like about being at workplace, having someone as a neighbor, even having someone as a close friend, most Singaporeans, 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 Singaporeans are actually very comfortable having someone of another race, whether it's Malay, Indian, or Chinese, as a close friend, as an employer, as a neighbor. The next slide speaks about interracial and religious social trust. How much do we trust people of another group? Think about the different groups that are in Singapore, and are we able to trust each group of them? Especially when a society would go through a crisis, a difficult situation. Are we willing to say, well, you know what, I can trust anybody, any group. It doesn't matter whether he is a Christian, whether he's a Buddhist, whether he's a Muslim, whether he is Indian or Chinese or Eurasian. I am willing to trust him. I believe that because he is Singaporean, he cares about, he's willing to help me. Now, it doesn't happen all the time. Years back during World War II, right there in America, because the Japanese were fighting with the Americans, there were a group of Japanese Americans. These were born in America, people of Japanese descent. But the Americans decided that at that stage, they might be a threat to them, and so they kind of took them in custody and had them moved to a particular place where there was a lot of surveillance on them. So when things get bad, sometimes people decide that, there's some groups I will not trust because they might be a potential problem. But we're glad that in Singapore, we have come to a stage where for the good majority, we're able to trust people of other races, other religious groups, and we can expect that they will help us when we have a crisis point. Seventh thing has got to do with embracing colorblindness. This is about being able to go somewhere and feel that people don't care about your color. I have another slide there you can put in. I don't know whether you can see it, but if you think about children, it's a nice photograph. But you think about children are very happy playing. It doesn't matter what color they are. Even if, families or parents or maybe even society may have difficulty interacting between people of very different races, children have no issue. They don't see color in that sense. And in the same way, there's always that hope that as a society, as we progress, we begin to have less concern. It'll be terrible if you kind of know that people make decisions, if you ever feel that people make decisions of jobs or whatever application you put in, and then they see your name or your race and they say, yeah, these kind of people tend to be very talkative. These kind of people tend to be very money-minded. These kind of people tend to be very lazy. And then people have that kind of mindset, and then you feel this horrible because I'm trying to get a job. I'm not any of these categories. I'm actually a good person, hardworking, studious. But the first thing they see my name or my race, they say, nah, this guy is not going to fit us because of this category or this criteria, or because we think that he behaves in this way. This is something that we're still working on. Just under half of our survey respondents agreed or strongly agreed that they had a good idea of someone's behavior and views once they knew that race of that person. If we can kind of conclude and say, if I know that Mathew Mathews, when I used to teach, when I was in sociology in NUS, when I was teaching students, a lot of students, they don't know who I am, but they see my name, Mathew Mathews. And so a lot of people will bid for my class. They don't know who this person is. But they saw the name Mathew Mathews. So later I said, what was it? He said, Mathew Mathews sound like an Ang Moh name. So it must be European. So European lecturers are all very interesting and fun. So we all came to your class, but found out it's not real. So people have perceptions that, because of a name, because of a race, you are supposed to behave in a particular way. You might be a lot more interesting, a lot more boring, a lot more technical, something like that. But as we progress, we should go beyond that and not look at what somebody's name or race or color is, but who they are as an actual person. Can you move to the next slide? I'm coming to the close of it. But interest in intercultural understanding and interaction. Here you have a very high-ranking Buddhist monk and top-ranking Christian or Catholic clergyman. and both of them are shaking hands and talking to each other. It's a very clear symbol of our religious leaders in Singapore who are willing to find out and get to know what about the other religious groups and try to make sense of that and understand that. There's an interest in understanding what other people are like and who they are like. Sometimes because we don't know about another culture, why they do things a particular way, we have a lot of misbeliefs. When I was much younger, and when I heard Chinese funerals happen under the void deck sometimes, and the music and some of the things that went there, some of the noises, affected me quite a bit. I was it was kind of like, it was very, very scary. And so whenever there was a funeral, I would, kind of like have all the doors closed and windows closed, because just not, not familiar to me. Now, later on, when I started to understand, and I was very fortunate, when I was later on, I was concerned about this for quite a while, but when I was able to study and find out about why, for instance, Chinese, Buddhists or Taoists may have funeral rites in a particular way, what's the significance of it, what's important to them, then I began to feel, okay, I understand why they're doing that, I understand the reasons for this, and then it no longer becomes something terrorizing. It becomes, okay, if you understand something, you find it much more easy. You don't feel this sense that, oh no, it's very, very different, so I'm very, very uncomfortable. And sometimes when we're very comfortable, we keep away, and then we also kind of have negative ideas, and we brood ideas which are very, very not positive. But once we kind of find out a little bit more about it, we are able to relate in much better ways. So many of you know, you might be scared of eating something which is maybe part of another cultural group's tradition or practice. But when you actually start doing that, you might find, wow, it's actually quite nice, or quite good. We still have a long way to go with this. About 50% of our respondents indicated that they were strongly agreed that they like to meet people or get to know people of other religious groups, 6 out of 10 for different racial groups. And in the same way, we also asked people about how much they were interested in understanding different cultures. We still have a long way to go with that. In Singapore, we kind of accept, we tolerate the fact that we have differences, but not many of us want to go the extra mile to find out, why do people do different things the way they do? Why do they do it this way? Why not this way? It's only when we actually find out, we ask, and people are willing to share. And we, of course, ask in a polite way, not ask in a way like, say, why do you all do that? I don't like it. No, but ask in a way to actually find out. Then we get reasons and we get ideas, and then we know why our friends from a different custom, a different religious group, a different racial background, why do they actually do things? How do they do things, and why they believe in certain things? And we appreciate the difference and the diversity. Number 9, just get there. The sense of, as minorities, feeling excluded. We can get to the next slide. There's always a concern with those who may not be the majority population. Do they get the shorthand, the stick? Do they get a raw deal? And I'm glad that the issues may not be so persistent, but of course, among maybe about near 4 out of 10 of our minority respondents, they were a little concerned that they would not be able to get to top positions of corporations because they feel maybe there's some kind of ceiling. They call it a glass ceiling. There's some kind of thing which stops them. This may not be real. It may not be actual fact, but sometimes it's perception. And so, of course, as society matures, this perception should no longer be there. And we should come to a state when everybody feels that no matter what race you are, whatever religious group, whatever background, you have equal chance of moving up to the top of the ladder if you work hard enough, you've got the right qualities. Finally, the last slide, the presence of close interracial friendships. And earlier, the chairman, Mr. Zainuddin, talked about this. And asked you, go and look at your phone and see how many other people of other groups do you have? Do you know people, are there friends from another group that you can call, you can talk to? Or do we just have friends who are very much like us? All of us prefer to be with people like us. That's just the way it is. Similarity, birds of the same feather flock together. All of you are familiar with that statement. We enjoy being with people who are like us because they have same ideas, they think like us, they are like us. But until we step out and we actually get to know people who are a little different from us, only then can we really find out, wow, there's actually a lot of value. People who are not like us, who might be racially different, religiously different, may offer perspectives which are actually very enlightening, very interesting, sometimes different, but very, very helpful. In our study, we found out that only 45% of our respondents had a close friend of another racial group. We feel that a lot more can be done. Over time, I believe that more and more of our people. Now, one thing that we found out when we did this study was that among our younger people tended to be a lot more open to embrace diversity, a lot more open to find out more about other cultures, a lot more open to have friends of other groups. And I think that that's the future of race and religious relations in Singapore. As we continue to learn and try to seek and find out and begin to think less about color, but begin to think about the special characteristics of each other, I think we'll become a much better society. Last thought, and before I close, we're glad that we can live in Singapore. Now, when I was growing up in school, I used to be the only person, nearly for most of my school career, the only person who was not of the majority race. So sometimes being in that situation, I would end up feeling the sense of, people would end up saying things like, they would pick up all the differences. They would say, oh, why your skin so dark? They would say things like, and they always laugh. They say, you always like to run around the tree. That was a standard joke all the time, right? And those were things which I heard. It was like, it would go, and of course, it would always find some other way of pronouncing my name. So if it's not Mathew, they would find it would always be Muthu or Maniam or something like that. It would be a standard thing. This would be students, friends, teachers, everybody. Now, growing up in that environment, I learned a few things. One, I learned that despite the fact that people sometimes teased and laughed, they never in any way caused an impediment to my life. They never kind of, actually when the rubber hit the road, they didn't say, no. If you're going to share homework or help somebody, if you're not going to help that guy because he's different, no, it never happened to me. People were friendly, I was friendly to them, they were friendly to me, and we were able to get along despite some of the supposed teasing or differences. Over time, hopefully, more and more, I wish that we won't have many of those teasings, which can be sometimes insensitive. But I hope that even if there is such teasing, all of us in real ways would never exclude or discriminate or be prejudiced against someone else. But instead, we learn to build a good, happy Singapore. Thank you very much.